Welcome back to Her Perspective. Last segment, we were looking at the journey of the grieving process. Now we want to look at the goals, Grace. Could you just help us through that, the goals of grieving?
There are actually four universally accepted goals. The first one is to accept that the hurt has happened,
yes,
whatever kind of hurt. The second one would be willing to experience the pain, because grieving does come with pain. So be willing to go through that painful experience. And when you have gone through the painful experience, it would be like life anew. Third, be able to adjust to the environment without the thing or the person that you have lost. And finally, emotionally relocate yourself. So one has got to understand that, okay, if I'm going to be healed, these are the things I need to do. Accept that it happens and so on.
Okay, the second goal you said, be willing to go through the pain. What if it's overwhelming? What do you do?
Very good question. If it is overwhelming, that's when you need help. If you cannot do it alone, you get help. And a lot of persons think that asking for help is a weakness. It isn't. It is your greatest strength, because at least you recognize that there is a need. And also in counseling, that's one of the first things to acknowledge. When true counseling happens, when one realizes that he has a need. All right, so if it is overwhelming, get help.
But what about those who may feel that if they get help, it may be that they are not grieving as they should?
That is a normal feeling, not that it is normal to keep feeling that way forever, because some persons want to be so connected and want others to think that, okay, I am grieving, so therefore I loved my mother or my father or my son so much that I can't let go.
Yeah.
That they have to be careful of, because that can lead them into pathological grief when they are unable to let go of the source of the pain. So there is nothing wrong in feeling sad and about the loss, but what is wrong about it is if you keep holding on to the loss and not being able to live your life normally without the pain associated with the loss.
But people are different. People go through this process differently and at different rates, right? Now, there are females, for example, who will hide behind the career, hide behind. You realize that they bury themselves in work. They probably might isolate themselves. What advice would you give to somebody who is going through that at this moment? Somebody probably watching the program right now. They've lost a loved one. They don't see a need to acknowledge that they need help going through this process. They isolate themselves. They bury themselves in their work. How do you
To the person, I would say, use this opportunity to get the kind of help that you need and take it in stages. Maybe it is that when you went to church, you were sitting in a certain pew, a certain row with the individual, and you've lost the person, so you don't go to church. In this case, go to church, but sit on the opposite side. So you take it in stages. If it is that you could have picked up the phone and called 24 hours a day, that is something you're not going to be able to call the individual to get them. But at least call a friend and say, no, Lorraine, right now I'm thinking about Olive, and I really just wanted to touch base with you, just to see how you're feeling. So you start reconnecting and you start getting it out of your system. Then for the persons who are looking on, and that is why it is so important for us to surround ourselves with individuals who truly care about us. Because you cannot care about someone and see them going in despair and depression and not do anything about it. So call them. Hey, Lorraine, you didn't come to social last week, man. Or you didn't come to church, or you're at work and I see you hiding in your room eating when we are accustomed to sitting somewhere else to eat. All right, so what we're going to do now, you may not have to say that to the individual to say, come, let's do this. But you may just buy a cupcake cake. That's something that is funny for me. I like doing this.
Sell them. I'm upset.
No, they stop. Oh, no, that is a bad thing, man, because I just go and say, man, you want a kiss? And I just chopped and I pretend, and then I pull the kiss and just put it down. Within the context, it's funny, and the person will laugh because they're anticipating getting a kiss, but in actuality, it's a cupcake again. And you buy the lunch and say, okay, well, let's eat. So you, in a sense, you don't impose on the person too much, but you give them a chance to know that, hey, I am still here if you need me. And life goes on with or without what you have lost.
Are there some warning signs, though, to identify whether or not a person is grieving? For example, somebody who is in a new work environment, a female who is in a new work environment, a male, and you notice some behavioral changes. Are there any signs?
You just said it. Behavioral changes. They're not functioning the same way they're accustomed to.
But how do you associate that with grief, though?
With grief, and if you are aware that there has been issues with grief, you can associate it. But you will never know. As long as you see a shift in behavior pattern, a shift in work pattern, a shift in socializing, and all of that, those are signs that you want to say, okay, what's happening to you? I noticed that you used to come to work 8 o'clock in the morning. Now you're here from 6:30. Okay. Or you're here at 10. What happened? Never ask, why are you here? Because why puts them in a defensive.
Right.
You don't ask a why question to people who are hurting. Because it puts them in a defensive mode.
Ruby, quickly.
One other question I'd like to ask you. You keep mentioning church, going to church, but there are lots of people who don't go to church. What source of help would you recommend for them?
And I'm going to say, Dr. Kelly, I don't want you to answer this one. I'm going to say that, Ruby, there are other places that people can get help. And in our discourse, we have touched a few of them. But Dr. Kelly has penned a book, Grieve If You Must, which is very, very good. Yes, very, very good at helping persons. And at this point in the program, every week, we try to give sound advice. And so, and I'm sure it is in this book as well. Every person who experiences a death or loss must complete a 4-step grieving process. As you said, one, they must accept the loss, work through and feel the physical and emotional pain of grief, adjust to living in a world without the person or item loss. And then we are asked to move on with life. This is hard. The grieving process is only over when a person completes the 4 steps. And it's not only that it may be difficult, it will be difficult to do, but it is necessary if we are going to have a fulfilling life. So as your book says, grieve if you must.
Right. How do we get copies of this, though, Grace?
They're at the Kingston Bookshop. They're at Northern Caribbean University Bookshop. They're at the Seventh Adventist ABCs, the Health Center, Book and Nutrition Center.
Sure.
And they're soon to be accessible online. And I appreciate you mentioning that the book is written in a certain way that the comments I've been getting is that, man, it feel like you sit down there with me.
Talking to me.
Talking to me. So the book is written in a way where it gives persons permission to grieve in private. It's very interactive, and it gives you very different, many different tasks that you can, and activities in which you can engage through, while you go through the grieving process. And it's a 21-day plan for grieving, healing, restoration. I want to add, though, to the question that you asked. Mentioning church seems as if that's a natural thing for me.
For us, yes.
But I will say, for persons living near a school, the guidance counselors, they can access help through the guidance counselors. They can access help through different services. Say, for example, at the police stations, there are chaplains, there are also peer counselors. The Sissoko Center for Investigation of Sexual Offenses and Child Abuse. There's also Victim Support Unit. There is CDA and all those other areas. There's a Community Council and Restorative Justice Center in Mandeville. On the university campuses across Jamaica, you should have some counseling center, but Northern Caribbean University also has the Counseling and Psychological Services Center. There are so many different places that they can get help. And there are some helplines that persons can access where they can call for help also.
Thank you so much, Grace and Ruby. And that's how we end this episode of Her Perspective. We want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you, my guests, for being here this week. And we invite you to join us next week for for another episode of Her Perspective, where we explore issues facing women in Jamaica.
Remember, if there's an issue that you'd like us to discuss on this program, don't be afraid to send us an email or to visit our Facebook page. You'll see the information popping up on your screen just now. Ladies, thank you so much again. Sister Vernal, even though you didn't thank me, thanks.
Yes, Adise, thanks.
I'm Adise Jonas.
And I'm Lorraine Vernal, inviting you to come back next week to Her Perspective.
You forget what it's supposed to say. We can talk, chit chat.